Here is a Lakewood 18-inch high velocity VN model HV-18. This particular one is from November of 2006, so it was probably sold during the summer of 2007. This is a very important VN in my collection, and it was one that I had looked for and wanted for many years. Back in the early 2000s, might have been even 2003, 2004, somewhere in that range, I think it was either the HV-4 or the HV-9. Might have been the HV-4 first, I really can't remember now, but I had gotten one of those and I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And I used that fan all the time for years. And then a couple years later, I don't know what caused me to make the discovery. Perhaps I started using the computer, and maybe I had searched it on the computer, but I discovered that these fans existed in larger sizes. And then I saw at Ace Hardware one day that they had the 18-inch model, and ever since I saw it, I had to have it. And I harassed my mother about it for months, maybe even years, about it. And then finally went to Ace Hardware and I got it. That was in like 2008, I think. And by then, they had already gone to that cheaper version of the fan, which had the guard that looked like the HV-9 and the HV-4. And I don't think... I don't remember if at the time I knew there was a difference. Of course, that model was much cheaper than the one you're looking at now. But I think I kind of liked it at the time because it was a better match in appearance to the HV-9 and the HV-4. And so I had those three fans and I was thrilled with it. But in the back of my mind, I knew it wasn't quite the one I was looking for, because all the photographs I remember seeing on the computer were of this one, not the one that I had. And so I kept looking for this one, and years later on I found one. Of course, I had to import it from halfway across the country, so it cost a fortune, but it was well worth it because I had been dreaming of owning one of these for a long time. And so now here it finally is. And in fact, recently, within the last year or two, I ended up completing the entire series. I have one, at least one of each size. And that's pretty cool. So anyways, this is the 18-inch model. It does have the PRS motor, which I'm not exactly sure who made these. I don't know if Lakewood outsourced these or what. They did some flaky things towards the end of their time. I haven't cleaned or serviced this thing, that's why it's so filthy still, but it's the PRS motor. No oil port on this one. It's the newer switch, which is why I tend to believe that maybe the motor's not actually made by Lakewood. There's the UL sticker, 2006, towards the end of 2006. So this would have been one of the last couple of ones they made. I think they stopped making these in 2007. If not a little bit earlier than that, before they switched to the other design. And yeah, it's got a decent amount of power to it. It is, let's see, what is it? It is 2.4 amps. But I don't feel like these are as good as the patent ones, like the U2 1887. I just don't think that it's quite as powerful. It is a strong fan, but it just doesn't whip the air out quite like some of the other ones do. As much as I like these and they're extremely nostalgic to me, I don't think these were Lakewood's best pieces of work. I think they took they cut some corners in the motors on these. They don't seem to last too long. I've recorded videos of these before, in particular the 21-inch model, and I get comments and messages quite often about it, asking where a replacement motor can be obtained, and there's no drop-in that I know of. But the point is they're failing, and I tend to think that the motors were just a little bit overdriven. Maybe the capacitor values were too high, or some spec on them wasn't quite right, because they run hot. They run super hot, and they're really physically small. Now I know that they're PSC, and so you'll get more power in a smaller size than you would with an older shaded pole motor, but I still think that something just isn't quite right about them, which stinks because they're super cool fans, but I do think that they're not made quite right like they should have been. Like, this is just not cooperating. Okay, we're looking at 121.0 the volts right on the nose here. Over to amps, and we'll start it up on the low, which of course is the slowest speed. It's got a cool startup sound, but the motor already sounds like trash, and I don't think this has a lot of hours on it at all. That's pulling 1.22 amps. Power watts is 144, and a power factor of 0.98, which is very high. And yeah, the airflow is okay, but it's not impressive. It's pretty noisy, and it's just not impressive performance. It doesn't come anywhere near the TPIs or the patents. It just doesn't. Okay, let's go to the medium. The balance is actually surprisingly good. That's one of the things I'll give these fans, is that the balance on these blades is generally pretty good. I've noticed that across all the sizes of these, the balance is pretty good. It does shake a little bit, but it's not too bad. So it's still drawing 1.17 amps or 1.18 amps, which is identical to what it's drawing before I changed the speed. But yet we're getting a ton more power output, so that's kind of why that's another reason why I think that something wasn't built quite right about these motors. So it's 1.15 amps now, 135 watts, and a power factor of 0.97. And the airflow is just not impressive. It's a lot. It's moving a lot of air, but it's not. I don't even think it's competing with the low speed on the patents. It just doesn't move anywhere near as much air, which stinks. Alright, let's go to the high. And it's got a rattle on there. And if you notice, let me stop it for a second. I want to start it up cold, slow, off. I want to stop it and start it up stationary to high, and I want you to observe how quickly it gets up to speed. The it's just not, it's not correct. There's way too much power in that motor for this blade set. Look at this. I think it gets, it's like the motor to me just seems like it's overdriven. When you go from medium to high, it's there in an instant, like it doesn't take any time to get up to speed. And it's rated for 2.4 amps, but it's only pulling 1.8. Let's see what it does on startup. See how high it goes. I saw 2.01 at highest. So it's 1.84 amps, 202 the watts, and a power factor of 0.91. You know, and it's, something's rattling. I don't know what that is. Now it's starting to move a good amount of air, but it still just doesn't have anywhere near the velocity of the patent or the TPI. It's kind of hard to explain my disposition with the motor, but it just doesn't seem right to me. The motor seems like it's I don't know, it just seems overdriven to me. It runs too hot. Maybe the capacitance, let's see what kind of capacitor. Does it say what the value is? Nah, don't say the value. Does the motor say the value? 8 microfarads. Holy mackerel. 8? Yeah, well there you go. I knew something didn't seem quite right about this. Stinking 8? That's absurd. 8 microfarads. That is a lot of capacitance. Now look at the capacitor on the Macmillan motor in the 1887. I'm pretty sure it's only like 3 or something. Let me see. I got one here. Let's see if I can check it. Oh, it's not saying. Oh, it is saying. What is the microfarads? Huh, it's 8 as well. Well, you know what? I think it's overdriven on that motor too. Those didn't last as long as they should have. Well, I think something more like 5, you know, would have been more reasonable. There's another informations tag. Made in China. Oh, great. I don't know. I think that there's just too much capacitance on these motors. And even just from that short couple minutes, it's already got heat coming out of it. I don't know. To me, it's too much capacitance for that motor. It's a small motor. I don't think it's wound that good. Just too much capacitance. You know, it's a small, like, look at the stator. It's tiny. It's a little thin pancake stator. Tiny little thing. You know, I mean, you shouldn't be jamming 8 microfarads through that on a big 18-inch blade. Nah, that ain't right. Not made right. I just don't think it is. But with that aside, it does have some pretty cool startup sounds. So let's take a listen to these startup sounds and get this off the tripod. And these windings, like, they're hard to see because they're dirty, but if you look at the thickness of the wire gauge, look how small it is. Whoops. It's a really thin gauge wire, and that contributes to why it runs so hot. And like, if you look at something more reputable, let's take a look at this Macmillan motor in this 1887. Okay, you can see that the windings are much thicker compared to this one. So it's hard to see it because it's so dusty, but look at how thin these windings are. Super, super thin. So I think between the thin gauge wire used and the high capacitance, these just were not set up to succeed long term. They just weren't. And it's too bad because they're cool fans, but they don't seem to last. Okay, here's the starting up sounds on high. It's got a really cool starting up sound. Sounds like a much bigger motor than it is. This is already hot. That's crazy. Here's the medium. Ampersand, here's the low. I don't know if it needs a revarnish or what is the deal with it. Probably could benefit from a revarnish, but it sounds very bad to me. Sounds like the windings are all loose and vibrating in there. Anyway, so there it is, the Lakewood HV-18. And not really the best high velocity fan out there, but it was a big childhood dream of mine, so I'm glad I finally have one.